Morning, welcome to this Friday walk and talk episode entitled The News. Now, we recently launched this new Friday segment. Well, not this segment because this is occurring at around about 11:45 in the morning. Normally broadcast at 5 o'clock on a Friday, but that's the details. We decided to create this Friday kind of news roundup segment to cover the issues of the day, the issues of the week, pertaining to the kind of core elements that we've been investigating, sense making around, and examining. And there's plenty that we could be talking about today. But the sun is shining, it's Friday, and I don't think we need any more bad news, because if we were to wrap up the news for the week, it's pretty dark. Whether that's the latest developments in Ukraine with the global situation unfolding, including the latest meeting amongst NATO, G7, issuing threats about how they will respond if Russia takes certain actions. Although I will comment, the politics of it all is just quite laughable. I mean, just looking at the language, you got these inflammatory headlines across the press about how Biden says NATO will respond if Russia does X, Y, or Z, in this case, chemical attack or chemical weapon, use of chemical weapons. But what does that actually mean? When you actually, as with most news articles, actually read the detail, it's very loose and vague statements saying we'll respond, but we're not sure how we will respond, but we will respond. Okay, well, what is a response? What are the possible responses that you may entertain? There is no hint of any specific response nor the gravity of such a response, but it makes for good headline fodder to keep the world in fear, which is still doesn't take away from the realities of the situation, which is dark and bleak. If it goes the wrong way, we're all a bit screwed. But I don't think it will come to that. I have hope that it won't come to that. So we have that situation. Meanwhile, in the news, I did say I wasn't going to cover the bleak stuff, but I'm just going to throw it out there just so it's just gone. North Korea testing missiles that have, the ability to travel between continents, reaching, the longest lengths yet. It's like everyone is flexing their muscles to show that they still have the might in order to control the world order. And I just find it quite peculiar, as I go about my daily life, thinking that there's actually human beings made of the same flesh and blood as you and I, out there in the world, thinking about how they can use weapons and all these kinds of heavy-duty pieces of technology, innovations. There's people in the world out there actually building and creating and imagining different ways in which we could inflict terror upon the world in the name of defense. And then others considering how they will deploy them, and then some even deploying them. And I just find it quite peculiar how here I am standing in the sun in my, recognizing my privilege. That's a term that we have to find ourselves using all the time to recognize that we're in different scenarios, we're in different environments, and it's very easy for me to walk around in the sunshine on my own piece of technology doing this very broadcast. But the reality is, what is it that is different amongst the humans amongst us who, for not even a second in their lifetime, even imagine, even consider the possibility of inflicting egregious harm upon other humans or societies or beyond. What is different? I pondered this last night with the crew at Rebel Wisdom. Big shout out to the Rebel Wisdom crew. As part of their sense-making program, we had an audience with Daniel Schmachtenberger last night. Fascinating human being. If you're not familiar with Daniel's work, I would suggest a really good introductory episode if you wanted to check out his commentary. There's a 2-hour epic that he did with Aubrey Marcus on Aubrey Marcus's show, where he talks about exponential technology and exponential threats and how where I intend to pivot this conversation shortly, but is it the human civilization itself? Is it preordained? Is it a function of the systems or mechanisms, or whether it's capitalism or today? And it's time for us to change the narrative. And I shared with Rob Moore yesterday. I had the honor of visiting Rob at his studio up in Peterborough, the Disruptors studio. We spoke at length for 2 hours yesterday about revolution, New World Order, World War III, but really to try and make sense of how do we alter the trajectory that the world is on right now. Because it's loud, it's noisy, it's oppressive, it's scary, it's frustrating. I've talked about the geopolitical situations, but we've got the budget here in our own country, the standards of living challenges, lowest in X amount of time, highest inflation in decades. There's just, it can be very frightening, it can be scary, it can be intimidating. And the way in which all of these things are presented to us in the media, I mean, to me it starts to feel like a grand illusion. It just feels like a big game that we're all intertwined in. And because history repeats itself, I've spoken at length on Monday about cycles. I talked yesterday about economic and political cycles. All these things are relatively predictable when you look at history. This point in time right now, I've said it throughout the last couple of years, has so many parallels to what we witnessed in the 1960s. It's becoming almost identical. Cold War, pandemic, racial tensions, class tensions, standards of living dropping. It's practically the same thing. It's practically the same. And interesting in terms of my own experience witnessing what happened in the 60s. I always look back, not that I was there, not old enough, if you hadn't noticed, but maybe I was there in a different life. But I've always looked back at the kind of counterculture revolution and the movement that unfolded in the wake of all those conditions, and the great era of creativity, of hope and optimism, and this idea that we can transcend the systems of the old, the arcane, that we can break through from the patterns that lead to these cycles. And whilst it may feel like decades ago, the 1960s, really, it's 60 years. And we have these epochs, these great cycles, these great phases. And there are so many things right now indicating that was almost like a tremor back in the 60s. Like a tectonic shift that began to happen, a rumbling. But that rumble is now growing. And, when tectonic plates shift under the earth, they can result in earthquakes, volcanoes, and these eruptions. And it feels like we're either experiencing another tectonic shift whereby perhaps it is merely a rumble once again, or perhaps this time it's something bigger. Perhaps this time it really is a transition, a phase shift, a cycle shift. If you look at the politics and the economics of it all, it does look like we're at the beginning of or the end of one cycle and the beginning of a new. Many people talk about the new world. Well, the new world is being built as we speak. People are getting on with their lives in the background and imagining what the future looks like. and starting to create a better tomorrow, whilst the rest of us have our attention on the noise. And I'm increasingly recognizing that there comes a time where we must tune out from the noise. Yes, we need to pay attention to the noise in order to find signal, and it's the signal that will guide us. But my own life's experience teaches me that we often look outside ourselves for that signal amongst the noise, when in fact the real signal is within us. And as I witnessed these kind of horrors unfolding, and I had one of those moments this morning that was directly almost akin to what led me to taking a profound step forward during the course of the pandemic, when I reached a point of leverage. I reached a threshold point where the way that the pandemic was being managed on a global level, the level of corruption and cronyism, the level of misrepresentation and manipulation, the level of fear-mongering and use of nudge and behavioral science, the way that all these things have started to unfold, the great harms that I was witnessing around me, I reached a point of threshold where I said enough is enough, and I decided to speak out upon what I was seeing in the world, because I was triggered by the harms that I was particularly witnessing when it came to children, young people, the next generation. And at that point I didn't have my dear son Zach. He wasn't even on the way. Maybe he was, you know. Maybe this thing is all mapped out, who knows. But certainly in terms of the biological process, he wasn't on his way yet. But there was a knowing inside me that we're on that way, on that journey. And now that he's here, and the first thing that flaps up on my screen this morning the first thing that I see popping up on my screen this morning is the number of children who have died in Ukraine. That's the first thing I see. And it brought me right back to that moment when I said enough's enough. Enough is enough. Enough is enough. And I can't just stand on the sidelines any longer. It's that moment again, it's that tap on the shoulder that says, just, you have to do something. Now, don't get me wrong. You could see a text, a tweet, a message, a headline in many other countries around the world. There are many other wars that are not being spoken about because it doesn't meet the kind of corporate and global interests of the interested parties that are meeting at these G7 meetings and at the gallant affairs where the world's elite explore how they can further exploit these opportunities for their own gain under the illusion of doing good for humanity. Now that is woefully judgmental. I hold myself to account to that. I'll speak more about judgment in a moment, the witness of the mind that judges versus the loving witness that sees all through love. It's a journey. But nonetheless, that was the first thing I saw this morning, and I thought, why, oh why? Why must we witness this suffering on such a scale? And it's not limited to Ukraine. And any one of us, really, if we're truly Team Humanity, the oneness amongst us, amongst all human beings and all species, we have to get out of this mentality of like, go Ukraine. You know, I see all these videos popping up around, you know, this advocating for Zelensky. You know, they're portraying this relatable character who, you know, runs around in his hoodie and gives these impassioned, empowering speeches. And, you know, that all of those things are true. He is doing those things. But let us not be under any illusion that Ukraine is far from perfect, free, open democracy and society. Let's not shy away from that fact. Let's not shy away from the fact that things aren't quite rosy there and that everyone has a role to play. The fact that if they'd made a decision to play neutrally and reject the advances of NATO, perhaps not. Maybe this will have been avoided. Maybe it wouldn't. But irrespective of all of that, without going into the sense making and taking our minds down the track of what is real, what is not real, what is truth, what is meaningful, Those things are important, but not for now. The point is, when we see the numbers of people that are dying and suffering in Ukraine, it is remiss of us if we ignore other wars occurring right now. It's remiss of us if we forget the harms that our own nations have caused for other citizens around the world. And it's absolutely remiss if we ignore the Russian citizens, irrespective of what their leadership and those involved in their leadership are doing. History shows us that when wars like this occur, when tyrants emerge, the conditions that lead to people participating in those things play a function, play a role. Now, I'm not diminishing human agency, but I'm also witnessing the group dynamics that occur in these situations. So even some of the most senior people within Putin's regime, I could imagine deep in their soul, do not want to be part of this, but are somewhat trapped by their own predicament. Doesn't excuse it, but it's to understand that. But nonetheless, the citizens of Russia, are they guilty by association? The world is almost treating Russians as though they are, whether it's oligarchs, business leaders, choir, orchestra, yeah, the leader of the orchestra, I can't remember the name of the person that stands at the front with a little magic wand, and all the Russian citizens who right now and for the foreseeable future, thanks to the sanctions placed upon their nation, will endure great suffering and poverty, pain and loss. Where is our heart if we can't place a portion of our heart to those within Russia? Why is it frowned upon the world of social media for us to say anything positive about Russia or Russians? How is that right? To me, the world is upside down. The world is in chaos. We're in this tumultuous period of time which can either break us and break our hearts, and maybe that's necessary in order to get leverage in the way that I got leverage myself previously in order to stand up and speak out. And that's how once again I was reached that leverage point this morning when I said enough's enough. I must say something. Because each one of us has the capacity to speak out about what we see in the world, even if we don't know how to solve it. And believe me, my mind is racing to figure out how do we live in a world that is free from violent conflict. I don't imagine a world ever where we eliminate conflict. We can have harmonious, respectful conversations between us. We can seek united polarity. But if we lived in a world where we were just the same, unison, same perspectives, same beliefs, same ideologies, same interests, same values, this world would be not what it is today. The differences amongst us is what makes the rich tapestry of being human so magical and beautiful. It's how we navigate those differences that is the challenge, and how we find unity amongst our polarities, how we find a shared reverence for one another, even if we see the world in a completely different way. That is the opportunity for us to evolve, but maybe we do need to break down in order to break through. Maybe we need to reach that point. History shows that that may be the case. But we're certainly now navigating the chaos. But the good news is, chaos always precedes order. Chaos always precedes transformation. Chaos always precedes transcendence. So in one hand, we can become deeply depressed, angry, frustrated, sad, as I felt this morning. And that's all part of the human experience, and we shouldn't try and suppress that. We shouldn't try and push that down. The fact that human beings suppress their emotions, and I want to speak to the men on this video because men have a habit in particular of doing this, which is why the male suicide rate is so astronomically high. We struggle to embrace our emotions. We're afraid of our emotions because we've been told in order to be masculine men, we need to be rugged characters like Zelensky, who rolls up his sleeves and enters into war like G.I. Jones, or whatever the name, G.I. Joe. But the reality is we're all emotional beings. And to me, the fearless warrior, the fearless man, if you will, in this case. The same for women, the same for masculine, same for feminine. The fearless human, let's say, is one that is able to confront and embrace the whole entire spectrum of our emotions, from ecstatic joy to the darkness of depression and everything in between, and be able to lean into what that emotional spectrum is trying to teach us. And we can learn to cultivate those higher vibrations. And isn't it so important that right now that part of the way we navigate this breakdown, this breakthrough, this chaos, this disorder, is by taking full agency and responsibility for our own sovereignty as human beings, but in particular our emotional state, our vibration, the energy in which we bring into the world. Because this morning when I saw that Twitter just flash up on my screen in an instant, my state was taken down into the depths of horror and despair. Fortunately, I've learnt the tools and the practices in order to recognize that instantaneous shift, that instantaneous trigger, and be able to find a way back from that pain and bring it back to equilibrium, to harmony, but also into a state of positivity, hope and optimism. Which is why I say that whilst the world is in chaos, chaos precedes order, chaos precedes transformation, chaos precedes transcendence. And when we know that, it brings great hope. It does bring great optimism. And it gives us an opportunity through our agency, through our ability to navigate our own emotional spectrum, bringing ourselves out of despair and into bright, vibrant light, in order to radiate that love and light around the world. Because right now, what can we do in order to end the world? The most simple act that each of us can undertake right now in this present moment is to find peace, love, and freedom within. Peace, love, and freedom within ourselves. Accompanying that with loving kindness, with compassion, with respect, and to place the loving witness within us in charge. Yesterday I found myself in fear. My team and I were talking about how we navigate the creation of the new world, and there's a nervousness that comes with that. There's the unknown, the fear of the unknown, and this inner perfectionism that comes with trying to do the right thing, which creates tension physically and externally. And I caught myself, not in the moment, but afterwards. We can't always be present enough to catch it as it happens, but as long as we catch ourselves within a reasonable frame, we can course correct. And it reminded me of the importance that we have to allow what needs to unfold in the way that it's supposed to unfold, but we also have to play our role in taking our full agency and sovereignty into this situation and take ownership for our role in the interconnectedness of all things. Because whether you're in action or in inaction, you're playing a role in what is unfolding in the world today. What we do today can create a ripple effect around the world. If you wish to see greater peace, love, and freedom, find it within. Seek it, know it, dance with it, be it. Be peace, be love, be freedom, be compassion, be loving kindness, be the loving witness in the mind. Because the judging mind, the one that looks at what someone else is doing and critiques, criticizes, is born out of our own fears. Our fears of being wrong, our fears of not being loved, our fears of not being enough, and it's born out of a desire to be right. And in many ways, all of those fears are what lead to what we're witnessing in the world today around the conflicts that we're seeing, just on a much grander scale. When individuals and collections of individuals put themselves in situations whereby those fears are magnified and they never have the opportunity to self-examine and go within to find that freedom, peace and love that will heal themselves and heal those around them by leading through that healing. I came into 2022, I came into 2020, I came into this decade with great hope and optimism, and I still hold that great hope and optimism. I could see through the patterns of history that we were on the verge, we were on the edge, Perhaps I could sense the plates under the earth. Many of others I've connected with have sensed those shifts, the movement of that tectonic shift in its rumbling, its rumblings. And now it's more than rumbling, those plates are vibrating. And the chaos is unfolding. But now if we're able to take full responsibility for ourselves and our own actions, our own state of mind, our own feeling, when we're able to become the loving witness, when we tune in to social media, when this morning I went from judgment to what is happening in the world into the loving witness that says, how can we play our role in bringing greater peace, love, and freedom to the world? It's become clear. It's very clear. Because if each one of us inspires another to find peace within and love within and freedom within, then that starts to amplify. It starts to create a ripple. It starts to create a wave. And we create a tectonic shift of our own. I believe we're at a point in history where we have two choices. We have the choice to be sucked in to the chaos and the disarray and the disorder and the tumultuousness that comes with that, and find ourselves on a path to our own self-termination, whether that's imminent or down the track into the future, or whether we do what humans have managed to this point in time always succeed in doing, which is finding a way to adapt and survive. Our ability to adapt and survive as a species is what enables us to evolve in the way that we've evolved. And we are now being tested in ways that we haven't been tested for many years. But it's under those conditions. It's under those conditions where everything has been so tense, so tight. And in the last 2 years, everything has been under this authoritarianism, this intensity. The chaos is what is often needed to break through that tension and create the conditions for change, and that is what we're witnessing. So rather than taking the path of chaos and disorder into self-termination, I believe in the power of the human creativity, our ingenuity, our ability to transcend. Our ability to transcend the situation that we find ourselves in, our ability to self-transcend into peace, love, and kindness, and freedom, inner freedom, and to become a reflection of the world that we wish to see by our own sense of being. I believe we're at the dawn of a real phase shift in humanity. This is our opportunity to explore how through our own sense of being, our own actions, our own mode of thinking, our own individual and collective evolution, we become able to transcend what we're facing. And through that transcendence, as we evolve our thinking and we find a way to break down the conflicts amongst us by tackling the conflicts within us, we create the space and the capacity and the ability and the mode of thinking and the states of consciousness in order to design the civilizations of tomorrow upon which we will build a better future for the children and ourselves. That capacity is within each one of us. If there's one thing that I want to witness in the world right now, it's an awakening. I was about to say a political awakening because, it's a political scenario we find ourselves tackling over and over again. But it's an awakening. It's an awakening from our slumber. The slumber under the pretense that we cannot influence the world around us. That, friends, is an illusion. Whilst, yes, the macro environment around us is big and it's a function of many people's decisions, many things outside of our personal control. Some would argue everything is preordained and predestined, and maybe that may be so, but nonetheless, we have our part to play. We have our part to play in manifesting the future. I do not believe this world will take the path of self-termination, but perhaps it will if we do not, in ourselves, take a stand and be willing to stand up and speak out against the things that we see in the world that are causing egregious harm to ourselves, to humanity, the world we live in, and then to take steps forward into imagining and reimagining how we can move forward from here and how we can design a better tomorrow. The future is not yet written, and even if it is, we have our role to play to manifest it, and it begins right now. It begins right now, and I mean literally right now. If you're watching this live or in the replay, I encourage you, I invite you to take a moment to breathe. Take 3 deep breaths. Find the peace within, find the stillness, find the calm. Go within and find the conflicts within yourself. Seek to resolve those conflicts, seek to lean in. What are the conversations you need to have inside your own mind, your own being? What are the conversations you need to have with your loved ones? How do you build bridges amongst those that you have fallen out with in the past? How do you find peace within? Peace in the world around us will come when we find peace inside ourselves. So I invite you on a journey of exploration today. When I ask you what's going on in the world, let me tell you what I think is going on in the world. We're on a path of transcendence. We're on a path of peace. We're on a path of love. We're on a path of freedom. We're on a path of acceptance. And that comes when we relinquish the judging witness inside of us that is seeking to be right out of our own fears, and rather we take the path of the loving witness, the one that is able to see all and hold a space for all. Doesn't mean we have to let go of our own thoughts, our own views, our own biases, our own perspectives. We can hold on to them as strongly and tightly as we wish, if that's what you want. But it comes with a loving respect for others, and to recognize the oneness amongst ourselves and all things. And that this spring, this summer, is a springboard into that great period of transition from the chaos into a new phase of order in peace and prosperity. But it's down to us to help move that along in peaceful love and kindness, extending our arms to our brothers and sisters, and to be the change we want to see in the world. So that is the news for today, my friends. That's what's going on in the world. Now, what's going on in your world? Tell me in the comments, what's going on in your world? What are your challenges? What are your struggles? What are you dealing with? How can you find healing yourself right now? How can you find greater meaning in this situation? Because our ability to confront our own challenges, our ability to find meaning in the world around us, is what awakens us from our slumber. And it's in that awakening that we find a path ahead. We find a point of curiosity where we can explore. And it's when we begin on that journey, that adventure, we don't need all the answers. We just need some sound questions and a longing for the change in the world that you wish to see, and it begins with ourselves. So share in the comments what's going on, what's the news in your world? What are you seeking? And how can we create that together? All right, friends. If any of this resonates with you in part or in whole, I invite you to join us inside of our community, the Elevate Network. We're co-creating a space where we can have these types of conversations, where we can explore how we can bring about that counterculture movement that will elevate humanity and enrich the world, that will help us transcend the situation through practices and principles that are time-tested in order to help us navigate our own inner conflicts, in order to find peace, love, and freedom within, and prosperity and abundance, and growth, and all those things, and safety and security. All of our human needs are important, even if they are different amongst us. and how we can go about designing a civilization of the future, and how we do that in a way that sustains us and sustains the world we live on, and how we can do that through the lens of united polarity, recognizing that we will all see different paths and different ways of attaining that new future, but together, as we walk the path, we can transcend the chaos and move into a new era, a new world, where we can create a better future for ourselves and the children of the future. So please hit the share button if this has been meaningful to you. Please come and join us inside the Elevate network. We are elevate.org. You'll see on the landing page when you join a little bit about our story. To be quite frank, it still tells the old story of yesterday. It needs to be updated for the story of tomorrow. But it's the opportunity to come and join us and explore, in sense making, what's happening in the world, but ultimately finding a way to navigate our challenges and to transcend in order to emerge from this prosperously, with prosperity, with peace, with love, with freedom. It's all there for us. We just have to walk towards it. All right, friends, peace and love. Have a wonderful weekend. Stay blessed. Tune out from what's happening in the world. Tune in to what you want to see. Rise up, become the leader you want to be.